not I'm not entirely sure though.
Yep, they're there. Thank you for joining our session today from the Tech Interactive. My name is Erica Barwetto. I'm the Senior Director of the Bowers Institute at the Tech, which is the branch of the Tech that really focuses on translating things we do within the Interactive, in our Tech Challenge program and in other signature programs into resources for educators like yourselves.
And I'm Amy Bucher. I'm a professional development specialist with the Bowers Institute and the Tech Interactive, and I've been working in both classroom setting as well as out of school and virtual settings for over 15 years. So I'm excited to share some ideas for 3rd through 5th grade with you today. Our session goals are to do a design challenge, and we're going to have a chance for those of you who are able to prototype with us to share what you make. We're also going to go over some facilitation tips for both in-person and virtual implementation, and we'll model some of those today as well. And then we'll discuss some techniques for developing themes that align with standards and student interest and learning goals.
Throughout the session, if you have questions, feel free to chat them to us, and we'll address them at the end and maybe along the way as we go.
Yes. So our agenda today is to go over what design challenge learning is and what design challenges are. Just a quick overview. We'll do the design challenge, talk about some techniques for 3rd through 5th grade, and we'll do some strategies for virtual learning. And we'll have a Q&A at the end, but please, as Erica said, put any questions you have in the chat as we go along. So what is a design challenge? At the Tech Interactive, design challenges have been part of our DNA since before we had a physical building. They were part of our Tech Challenge when we started doing it. And for us, design challenges use real-world problems to engage learners in an iterative design process. You can see in the graphic on the slide our representation of this innovation design process. So in the middle, we have imagine, create, test, and reflect as a cycle that you go through and move throughout an iteration. And then around that are sort of the metacognitive pieces of design, defining your problem and sharing solutions. And then around that are what we have termed our innovation mindsets. So innovator mindsets are things like being bold, being curious, collaborative, these more SEL skills that we encourage educators and learners to reflect on throughout the process. Some key features of design challenges are that they're solvable by multiple solutions. So that question of what's the right answer is not going to be answerable in a design challenge because it's an open-ended question, which might have many variations of solutions. In addition, there's multiple opportunities for iteration. So your learners will be testing and improving on their designs, and that quote of "I'm done," there's always opportunities for them to try to improve and change and make their designs better. In addition, design challenges connect with participant interests. So there's an intrinsic motivation because it's something that they're interested in, and likewise, they make explicit connections to real-world problems and to careers as well. And Erica's going to go over some of the ways now that design challenges also connect to the content that you're doing within your classroom.
Yeah, so in this session, we really wanted to focus a little bit more on 3rd through 5th grade and what you all are focusing on and what your students are focusing on. And so that idea of design challenges being a great partner for content and content learning as well as standards. And so where can that come in? And really the answer is anywhere. So you can have the content be something that you connect with before a design challenge, during the design challenge, or after. So when it's before, right, you're having the content knowledge introduced before, and then during the design challenge, there's an opportunity to reinforce that previous learning. For example, reading a book and having the design challenge jump off from that book be a way to reference and reflect on what happened in the literature. During a design challenge, you can bring in concepts and content as it's relevant and as the students are really interested and curious. So let's say you're have a 3rd grade class that's learning about wetland ecosystems, they can start using new vocabulary. You can introduce it along the way, introduce some of those key concepts and information about some of the organisms as they're doing their design challenge and refining that. And then their designs can really show that understanding of concepts. And then after a design challenge, you can have, the design challenge can really be that launching point for the inquiry-based investigation of an idea. So they can do the design challenge, and then you can really get into, like, well, we saw a lot of these interesting force interactions with forces and saw these different effects on our design. So now let's really investigate some of those scientific concepts, some of those terms a little bit more. Example we have here is around natural hazards, right? You begin with an earthquake design challenge, and then during that, a lot of questions and conversation are going to come up around the geology and of earthquakes. And so you can then are ready for that science content to come in later. And then another way to think about those content connections is just beyond science, right? There's an opportunity to connect with social studies as well as English language arts, science, obviously, and math, and the social emotional learning. So when you're framing a challenge, that's a great time to use science and social studies concepts. So if your design challenge is going to be connected with the real world, then there's often, again, a societal connection, a historical connection, or a connection with that science content. And then in creating guiding questions that really support that design challenge, you can delve into those content areas again. When the students are actually doing the design challenge and reflecting and sharing, there's an opportunity for English language arts, especially persuasive writing and argumentation, that's also in NGSS, so that crossover piece to be something that's practiced. With math, you can really use those graphing, charting, and measuring skills, as well as specific math content, other math skills that you might want to incorporate. Obviously, science vocabulary and concepts are easy to pull in. And then with the social emotional learning, really having them practice and reflect on creativity, collaboration, and perseverance, most specifically. So just to think about that another way, you can also think of it around this design challenge cycle that we shared earlier, so that science and social studies are really brought in when you're defining your problem, that the social emotional learning and science vocabulary and concepts are brought in again when you're imagining and creating, as well as testing and reflecting. And then the persuasive writing and argumentation and reflection, again, that connection is made during test and reflect and sharing your solutions most concretely.
Okay, so we've provided you with a little bit of background on content and 3rd through 5th grade, but let's really try to put these ideas into practice. So let's do a design challenge. So we're going to frame and introduce this challenge, then we'll prototype, imagine, create, test, and reflect, and then we'll have a chance to share our solutions, and we encourage you to get involved if you're able to. To start us off, we're going to use that poll we used at the beginning. And my question to you right now is just, which of these topics is most interesting to you? Should we do a challenge on Mars exploration, or emergency supply drop, or perhaps a skyscraper snack delivery challenge? So I'll give you all a few more seconds to respond. It looks like right now Mars exploration is winning.
And I just wanted to jump in and say that this is a great way to, as you can see, we're getting our participants engaged, interested here by giving them some choice. And also you might want to think about what might be content you might be interested in, but also your students might be interested in.
Okay, so right now I see we're gonna do a challenge around Mars exploration. So the next question I have for you is, in this challenge, we're going to be dropping or delivering something. So what would you like to deliver in our Mars exploration? So we're sending something to Mars. What are we dropping or delivering on Mars? I'll give you a chance to just type that in. Martians, okay, supplies, food. And you can upvote things by texting them again and again. So just a tip. Ice, water, a biodome, a rover. Supplies is winning out so far, but feel free to add on to that. Food, oxygen, a biodome. Okay, so I'm gonna go with, I'll give you a couple more seconds. Oh, somebody says technology, equipment. So far we've got food winning out. So we're gonna deliver some food to Mars. I guess maybe it will feed the Martians that might live there, or the scientists who are currently on Mars that are working there. So in this challenge, a next step might be, we're not gonna do this on the chat, but you can think for a minute for yourself of imagining. So is there a way to drop these, this food supply and have it land without being breaking or being ruined? So how would you drop something onto Mars without it breaking or being ruined? And you can just sort of chat that down yourself and think about it for a second.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can jot down those ideas, sort of start sketching or thinking about it, what you might want to use. And then sort of on that teachery level, right, what are some of these third through fifth grade skills or concepts that you might be using during this as well?
So some people are putting their ideas about how to drop things in the chat as well, a pillow or other things. So my next question is to take off your participant hat and think about this from the level of a facilitator. So if you are going to do this with your grade level and your students, what are some guiding questions that you might ask them to try to spark their interest or engage them in this challenge at the beginning? And again, you can focus on some of these topics or things that you anticipate covering in the coming school year or summer with students. So what are some questions that you might ask for this particular challenge if you were going to do it? You can put those in the 22333 chat if anybody has any.
Great. So what materials would you need if you were doing research there, or you needed to just live on Mars for a while?
Have you seen supplies protected in your daily life? How can you carry food without it spoiling? So getting into that aspect of it. Does what is dropped matter? Do the contents within matter? What's the gravity on Mars? Yeah. Some questions about forces or energy. What do we need to deliver food to places far away? Is there an atmosphere on Mars? So if you're focusing on Mars specifically, questions more about the science behind it.
And I can see a lot of students then wondering again about how long it takes to get to Mars. Should I send perishables to Mars?
A budget or other constraints. Yeah, we're gonna get, the next part I'm gonna go over is the design problem and criteria and constraints. And sometimes if your students are motivated enough, you can help them to define the criteria and constraints with you. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to our design problem.
Before, as you're moving on to the design problem, Amy, I just want to say that you all have a wealth of ideas here, and I can only imagine that your students are going to have the same kind of number and variety of thoughts, and providing even just a little bit of a sample time for them to come up with some questions as well. So you put out a couple guiding questions, but having them work in groups or do other, journaling and thinking about ideas is just, you're going to get at some great ideas, great interest, great creativity, and it's a really nice way to engage the students before you start the challenge and during the challenge, having that wall of questions up. It's a good strategy.
Okay, so your design challenge today is called Solve the Fall, and you're gonna build a device that will keep a payload safe, so our food supplies safe when they're dropped on Mars. For this challenge, we're gonna use a bouncy ball as our payload. If you have a light up one, that's even better because it can help tell us if it's broken or damaged when it landed. Your ball and device, we've come up with some criteria for you. Your ball and device have to stay together in one piece, and your device has to stay intact. So when it lands on the surface, it can't break apart. And similarly, your ball can't bounce or light up when it lands. Some more constraints. You're going to have 10 minutes to build and test. We might actually only give you 7 in this session because we're running a little short on time. And your ball has to be visible. Don't completely cover it up because we need to see if it bounced or lit up. For 3rd through 5th grade, we'll offer a bonus. If you can do this without tape or glue, that's even better. Try to challenge yourself to use other kinds of fasteners. So see if you can find other ways of fastening your device together instead of using tape or glue. Okay, so we're going to start prototyping now.
And if you are just starting out, so some of you might have collected materials or might have started on this before the session today. If you did that, that's great. You can take it further, so you can try and get your ball and device to bounce to a specific spot nearby, or you can increase the height, change your ball, the height that you're releasing your ball, change the ball that you're using. You can do one of those things. If you're just starting prototyping, then I'm going to jump to the other side of the chart and say, go around and find at least 3 items and just start building. So what items from your house might work for this challenge? How can you test those materials and see how you might use them? And then how can you start constructing something that you might use with your bouncy ball? If you get a little farther, you can test your combinations and test your components as we're building and prototyping today.
And some of you may not even have balls in your house to try it with, so you can always use anything that bounces or anything that you think would bounce on impact. So you can think about that as well. So my initial thing, I found these sponges, so I'm going to test if I can drop this with these guys. And I just
Amy,
used a rubber band.
I'm just going to let people know too that we're going to have you share out after this. So there's going to be an opportunity for a number of you to volunteer yourselves in order to share what you've created. So are we starting the timer now or soon?
Yeah, we're starting the timer.
All right, the timer has started. We're going to give you at least 7 minutes. So if you don't have any materials with you, do a quick search to find 3 things and start building. We are going to turn on cameras later for sharing. I don't know if we want to turn on anyone's while they're prototyping. That might be kind of fun. We'll see if we can get around to that. If you are interested in sharing your camera while prototyping or to share your solution in a few minutes, you can use the raise your hand function to let us know that you're willing and interested in doing that. Otherwise, we're going to keep chattering on and share a couple other tips and tricks during prototyping, as well as building some stuff ourselves.
So here's the materials list as a reminder, just so you all have this. We typically divide materials into categories. So anything from that category that will work, we give suggestions, but these are just ideas. So we encourage people to be creative. So like, for example, my sponges were not on this list, but I thought they'd work well as a cushioning material. So think about things that might fit in these various categories when you look.
And having these categories of materials is also, it's very freeing and creative for your students, right? It's not a kit where you're saying build this particular thing and use this kit, or even build whatever you want but use this kit, but really providing them a lot of opportunity and variety so they can think about what purpose, what's the role of that material, what properties does it have, and how could that contribute to my design. It also really helps when we're sheltering in place and when students are doing things at home, that they can grab things out of the recycling bin and use what's on hand. So I have a bag of stuff here that I've got my mochi ice cream box. This was from some limes. I have various rubber bands and twist ties from different packaging. So I'm really able to build a lot just based on those recycling kind of supplies that I've got on hand. So that also helps for materials access and everyone being able to participate.
So I'm going to test mine really quick just by dropping it here on the table. So let's see if it works. Oh, it lit up. I don't think that worked. I'm going to test something because earlier I dropped this and it didn't light up, and I think it mattered which way I dropped it. So, oh, it's very bad, very light up. Yeah, so that time it didn't light up as much because I dropped it at a certain angle. Let's see if I can make it stronger. Just a reminder too, these are the criteria and constraints, just in case you're interested in seeing those again.
So Amy, I think we have, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we have a few minutes of time before we still need to get to the sharing out. So I feel like people still have about 5 to 7 minutes, even though.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I've got this contraption, which I'm thinking now, if the cushioning at the bottom will help it if it lands. But I've also got this idea of suspending this so that it's hopefully not going to touch anything. I just now need to build the rest of what might go around it. So some sort of support or surround that this would be like inside of a box, like free floating a little bit. Is what I'm thinking. Orientation will matter, I'm pretty sure. And I have to cut a window in it so we can see whether this lights up or not. Otherwise, I'll be accused of.
Yeah, don't cheat on those constraints there.
My classmates will get mad at me.
That one worked here. Look, I dropped it. I mean, I'm not dropping it from very high, but it didn't light up because it landed on the plate. I don't know. Yeah, it does Allison, matter direction, I feel like.
Allison, if you want to activate a few people's cameras while we're building, is that okay with you, Amy?
Yeah.
Or should we just wait for sharing? We're going to try something new.
If anybody wants to share as they prototype, Allison can activate you as a panelist, and then we'll be able to see you and hear you.
We're still going to keep you on mute, I think, for audio mute for now, just to see what people are building, but we'll
feel free to raise your hand if you're interested in participating that way. This slide I had up just now was some questions that you can use during prototyping to help facilitate students at different parts of the process. So if they have a partial build or they feel like they're done and they need pushing to go further, these are some examples. And we have all of these resources on our website as well, including a video explaining this challenge. So you can refer to that later as well.
Yeah, this Solve the Fall video is nice because it's got an example of actually some real kids building and doing the challenge. You can see sort of what they're working with and how they're using the materials, as well as just how to set up the space.
Amy or Erica, I'm pretty sure that you guys have the authority to let people like show their video.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll turn them on once we get around to it. Amy, can you go back to the questions? And I'll pause my building for a second and let people share video. So with these different questions, they're really helpful at different parts of the build. And thinking about if students only have something partially built and they're either getting frustrated or saying I'm done, having them think about which parts of their device they can test in order to inform their overall design. Problem solving during it, what components are working, where are the failure points, and then how can you start altering that part of the design, sort of helping them make a plan for how to test and refine, and then pushing designs further, right? So I did it, I'm done. Well, what can your team really try to make this design even better? And what's a different way to solve the problem? Those are some really good design challenges. So I think here's my bouncing mechanism here, Amy. And then the other thing that we're able to check out today with all of you and to showcase are some ways that you can actually do these things virtually. We're finding that design challenges actually are really well adapted to a virtual environment. So if that's a situation we find ourselves in again in the fall, or partially in the fall, then it's really nice to have some activities where you can introduce the challenge virtually or with a group, and that you can do builds with folks, right? So we're now seeing here, along with the PowerPoint, you've got a couple other friends who are building that you can see them on camera, kind of checking stuff out. I can see
Yeah,
Cassell.
I can see Cassell and Diane on the camera now. So
Cassell's building her device. You can check it out. I've got mine. It's hard to, we've got a parachute kind of action with a little bit of padding at the bottom. Nice.
So we're closing it down on 1 minute left for prototyping. So if anybody else is interested in sharing during the sharing time, you can raise your hand again and we'll promote you to panelists like Cassell and Diane, and you can share during our sharing time.
And someone asked if we limit the amount of supplies. Each teacher is different. I like to give them kind of free access to as many different things as possible during a design challenge. That said, that's sort of initially just so they can play around and kind of mess with as many things as possible. That said, for younger students, sort of 2nd grade and younger, I tend to limit it just so they don't get overwhelmed, and then introduce new materials as you go along. You can also limit materials as an extra challenge, right? Like I use 10 things in my design right here. If I used, if I did this design, you could say, great, how could you do that without a certain part or without a specific piece? How could you do it with fewer things or with no rubber bands?
And somebody was asking how we do this kind of challenge while in distance learning. So we've done a couple sessions now where we facilitated like this, where everybody had their cameras on and you unmute people and then you have them share at different times. So we'll demonstrate that in a minute. So seeing people prototyping together and then also sharing live. There's also opportunities for doing the prototyping asynchronously. So students are doing it on their own and then sharing with each other on smaller group things within something like Zoom or within another tool, and then they come back together again for a larger group sharing. So there's a lot of variation between doing asynchronous and synchronous work, and depending on the tools that you're using, you can have students working together on different pieces of that, and we'll go over that a little bit more later on. So I think we're all out of time for prototyping. So if anybody else would like to be able to share during sharing time, I'm going to go over the directions for that now. So we're going to turn off the camera and go on gallery view so you can have people hold up what they're doing. And then we'll ask, have you all think about how are the devices similar or different and what do you notice about them? The other thing you can think about as people share, I'm going to ask each person who's willing to share what you made. How did it change as you made it? And then what would you do if you had more time for iteration? So Cassell, I'm going to have you go first.
And Amy,
then,
Amy, before we do that, I was going to give other folks an opportunity to raise their hand if they wanted to go on camera with their designs. I would say don't be shy, even if you have something that's just partially built. That often gives your classmates some great ideas, so that can inspire other folks. So raise your hand if you're also interested in sharing, and we'll get you into enabled with camera. Get your camera turned on, and then we can go through the process Amy said of having it all, being able to see all the things and share all the things. So we're going to allow people's camera. Yes?
Yes, so I think some of you just turned your cameras off. I didn't think I changed that. Let me see where my participants went.
So if you are now a panelist, you can
turn your camera on if you're a panelist. Is anybody having
so we've got
problems
Cassell,
with this?
Diane, Anne, Tammy, and Londa should be able to share, and we saw people a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And, Amy, I made you the host so you could like allow people in.
Okay. I think something changed in the settings, Allison. Okay, I guess I will make people co-hosts, Allison. Is that what I should do?
You should be able just to activate other people's like cameras and like microphones.
I was able to do that before, but that option seems to have gone away now. I'm gonna.
Thank you everyone for your patience.
Thank you. This is
Sorry, everyone.
a great example of technical difficulties.
We know you've all been dealing with it over the last few months yourselves. So.
So I have unmuted people, but I'm still not seeing the camera options. Allison, is that something you can do, or Erica?
I'm not seeing a way that I can do it either.
It should have been in the three dots over to the top at the top. It should have been.
I allowed panelists to start video, so you should all be able to start your video now.
There it is.
There we go.
Tammy, yes.
Okay, Tammy, since you are able to do it first, we'll let you share first.
Oh, Tammy, sorry.
Hi.
Hello.
So what I used was 3 items. I used some string. I did bubble wrap underneath this right here. And also I did a packaging bubble here.
Cool.
So this to protect it. And if I had more time, I would have closed this in more right here and this one in more right here. And then it would have been fully protected.
How does it work?
Let me see if, let's see. Okay, let's see. I need to go further down, hold on. Can you see it, if I do it?
Yep, I think so. Yeah, drop it a little higher up and we'll see it land here. Ah, looks like it works pretty well.
And it's a light up ball too, so it didn't light up.
Excellent.
There you go.
Well done.
Thank
Everybody
you,
give her a
Tammy.
hand.
Thank you. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but thank you.
No, you did. Well,
did
see,
great.
that's the thing. You came out with something that works. All
Okay, Cassell, do you want to go next?
Hi, I found some IKEA packaging that I cut up and then a toilet paper tube. So my idea was to make the ball less round by kind of putting it in this squarish, cubish shape. And then I stopped it from moving around by using little parts of the paper towel roll. So it works okay. We'll test it.
Nice.
It kind of flips over, but it,
Nice.
it doesn't really bounce around.
Excellent. So you found a way to mitigate its motion. What would you do if you had more time?
Yeah, if I had more time, I'd make it so that there was maybe a little bit more of what Tammy had in there. Absorb the force. And I was just working with some paper clips to keep things steady, so I'd probably work on that.
That looks great. All right, let's give Cassell a hand.
Londa, I see you next on the screen. Do you want to go next?
So first I tried well, I didn't have a bouncy ball, but I found a tennis ball and I had a rubber band. And then it wasn't working at all with first I did like just 2 layers of bubble wrap and I was dropping the tennis ball from above my head and it just bounced. So then I quadrupled it and it still didn't work. It just bounced, no problem. So then I'm like, bubble wrap and a tennis ball and a rubber band's not enough supplies. So then I start looking in my kitchen drawers and I found a reusable sandwich wrap that we made once upon a time for my kids at school. And it has Velcro, which is kind of cool. And then at first I did it on the Velcro end. So I put the ball on the Velcro in. And then I thought I couldn't enclose it. I thought we had to be able to see the ball. So then I made sure we can see the ball. And first I dropped it from the Velcro end and it just drops and it just basically, if it was an egg, it would break. It splats, but it doesn't bounce. And then I said, well, it's maybe cheating to put it on Velcro because, that's like extra. So then I did it the other side where there's no Velcro, it's just material. And the back side is plastic, like your tablecloths, a plastic tablecloth. And so I was thinking the drag, kind of a parachute, is what it would need. That's what I was thinking. And then when you drop it, I don't know if I can really demonstrate it. Let's see if I can. I'll drop it and show you all, or I'll just point it down. It just should go. So it doesn't bounce. It kind of split. Oh, I don't know what. It
Yeah,
just
just like a
flats.
gland.
Yeah, you can hear it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you,
and-
Rhonda.
Yeah, it thuds. It doesn't bounce.
Excellent.
Well done. And as we're transitioning to the next person, I will mention that this is also an eggless egg drop, if you guys haven't noticed that already. Right? It's a way that you can actually do it over and over and iterate on the design rather than one go and you have a mess to clean up and you can't use your materials again. So
Right. I do like that part.
Diane, do you want to go next?
Sure. I did not have a ball, so I have an egg that it's full of rice I use in the classroom. So I also found a little piece of sponge. It's the kind that if you get it wet, it expands, but I didn't get it wet. So I just used a rubber band to attach the egg to the sponge, and then I took a piece of tissue paper and 2 paper clips. There's my paper clip, and I paper clipped the paper to the rubber band. And if I drop just the egg, you can hear the rice shake when it hits the ground, but with the parachute, it lands pretty nicely.
Nice.
interesting. That's great. I love,
Thank you.
I would want to put the sponge in water and see what happens.
Yeah, what happens if
Actually,
it
it
got
would
wet?
work way better if the sponge was wet and expanded. It would be better.
Make a little puddle.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anne, I don't think we have video for you, but do you want to tell us what you did?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Well, I'm in my classroom. I did have a bouncy ball, and I have one of these microwavable trays, just a plastic small tray that I put the bouncy ball in, and I just attached it with a rubber band. I put a rubber band around the ball in the tray, and I dropped that and it bounced. And then I made this one modification that really made a difference. I had this bean bag that I put in the tray, and then I put the ball on top, the bouncy ball on top of the bean bag, rubber band around it, and dropped it, and it didn't bounce. It was like the bean bag was a great insulator, or anyway, interrupted the bouncing energy transfer.
Nice.
So that was successful. I'm sorry, I couldn't show you.
Well done.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We're all clapping for you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I'm gonna turn off your video and audio now, so we'll go back to being attendees. But let's give them another round of applause for being such great participants and examples during this. Thank you all. So that was an example of how you might share out during a session.
All right, so reflecting on what we did. So as a participant, wanted you to think about and just jot down briefly here in the poll everywhere. You can also jot it down on a piece of paper. What prior experiences really influenced your design, and what content or concepts did you reference during the design? So what might you have used from math, science, art, history, math again? We love math.
Sorry.
And I think that, again, this is what influenced your design. Where were your ideas coming from? And what content and concepts might you have referenced? You can even throw vocabulary words in there. I heard energy transfer during our sharing. What were you using? What was your thought process while you were building? So again, go to the poll everywhere. You can throw some ideas in there. You can also jot it down on a piece of paper, but then the rest of us can't see it.
You can put it in chat if it's easier for you.
Yeah, put it in chat if it's easier.
So we see some people using measurement for math. We heard energy transfer. Some people were drawing from their own experiences with the design process. And the parachute, the idea of a parachute. Some prior experience building parachutes and experimenting with them.
Egg drop designs, yeah.
That is something we've noticed when we do this activity in the interactive itself. We don't mention the word egg drop for adults because they do have a lot of prior experiences sometimes that might influence.
Yeah. And then someone had someone else's demonstration influencing their design. Can you add some detail to that, whoever added that comment, of what was it that you saw, or when did you see that? Talk about spheres, visual memories from moon landers. Yeah.
Mars rover, understanding.
That's great. Energy transfer again, the sponge. The sponge is inspiration.
Sponge influenced.
Thinking about drag, gravity, and forces, these are all great concepts. And again, you can see how just from pulling this kind of, having this sort of reflection with your students can pull out some of those words that they know, let them share some of those words, some science-related terminology, some things from their own personal experience, and really give them some ownership over that learning. So now as facilitators, now that you mentioned all these things that really influenced you during this design process today, how would you use that then for your students? So first question of how would this content really affect, and how would your experience and the ideas you thought of affect how you facilitate a design challenge, and perhaps this design challenge specifically? How might it influence what you share with students, what visuals you might have, or how you're setting a scene for them? What you might want to have them all experience together as a class before they do this challenge, just so they're all kind of on the same playing field, have some common experience. And what are some of the content connections specifically for your grade that you can think of? So this is sort of to get your juices flowing as even though you've just left the classroom for the summer, what's something that you might want to do for your classroom in the fall? How could you connect this with content and connect it with concepts that you're teaching? How could you really be specific about what you might connect it with in the content that you need to teach? Someone's commenting that the polls really give everyone a chance to participate. It's a great team building activity for sure. Not actually showing examples, which I'm on board with as well, even though we showed you some things.
If you do show examples, maybe a large variety so that it's not limited to one idea.
Right, or really those real world things. So having parachutes and Mars landers and moon landers, other things. So you're showing them some referential things without it being something that actually is going to work specifically in this design. Cooperation and team building, encouraging the test as you go, for sure.
People talking about showing a video to inspire students before doing the challenge.
Materials categories being a great way. With third grade, yep, the gravity, force, and motion, doing the units on energy. And we have a question. Yeah, someone's asking, what points do we encourage writing and reflection? I think that you can do that. There's a lot of opportunity for that. Having students do it as you suggested after they're selecting materials and thinking about how they plan to use it. I know that kind of writing and reflection works really well for some students, and for others, they really feel sort of stifled by that because they want to work with the materials. So being a little bit flexible about when and where you add in that is great.
So we were going to do one more opportunity for you to jot ideas. So we created a Padlet for this. I will share that Padlet with you. Sorry, just a second.
Right. You can throw it in the chat, Amy.
And we'll put the link for it in the chat as well. But Padlet is a tool that we know a lot of 3rd through 5th grade educators use with their students, and we thought it might be a fun way to try something out. So we will keep this Padlet open after this session in case people want to go back to it and refer to it, as well as add ideas. But we thought this might be a fun way for you to start organizing some of those things you just brainstormed into concepts that might be used for 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade. So you could post video links or ideas for how you might do different aspects of this, thinking about what content or standards you might use, student interests, and real world relevance. So feel free to go ahead and start using this. I'll give you a minute to put some ideas in here and organize, but then we'll get back to some of the other information that we're working on, and feel free to use the like features to like other people's ideas as well if you feel like it really resonates with you.
Yeah, and we thought this would be a great tool, again, for you all to share with each other, to share the great ideas that you have, some of the experience that you've used before, and really thinking about what might connect with the student interests, students that you've got, brainstorming some ideas and thinking about those content and real world connections as well. I know that there's a Mars rover being launched next month, in about a month, from a Lockheed and NASA team. So that's an exciting thing that I would want to tie into if I was doing this with my students over the summer.
So we've got some ideas here on forces, gravity, and motion for 3rd grade, and specific supplies and how to align that with the standards. Some ideas on energy crisis for 4th grade, and ideal colony idea for 5th grade. So lots of resources that you all can draw from later. I think my thing is pinging because Padlet is telling me I'm getting all your ideas.
I was just going to say we have an audio reference that great ideas are coming in.
Yeah. Let's see. So I'm going to go back to our slides because we have about 10 minutes left, and we wanted to get to your information on virtual setting as well. So
if we have time, we can jump back to the Padlet later and take a look at that. And feel free to keep filling ideas in and having that be part of it. So I wanted to show you this beast of a chart, and we'll share it out with you as part of the follow-up materials. It's best to print it on a longer piece of paper, a larger piece of paper. But if you want to jump back to the behemoth for a second, Amy, it's the Next Generation Science Standards Engineering progression, which unlike everything else in NGSS they did not make into a chart, but we did. So it's got K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12, just like all of the DCLIs as a progression. And it's got these specific areas for vocabulary, concept introduction, skills, skills in defining the problem, imagining, create, iterate, test and reflect, analyze, and sharing your solution. So this is all the language from NGSS that we have put into a progression chart. And so just to focus in then on the 3rd through 5th grade, what we've got is these sort of specific things here, right? So that they're given a problem, a need or want, they're working on that vocabulary of design problem, criteria, constraints, prototyping, fair test, control variables, all these things. They're dealing with simple problems with several criteria, with constraints on materials, time, and cost. They're doing some research, right? This is sort of what NGSS is expecting. I think the students can actually get into more complex problems pretty quickly, but NGSS seems to think a little otherwise. That they're building prototypes, they're expected to produce multiple solutions, identify failure points, so all things we hit on during this session. That they're testing and reflecting and analyzing is comparing solutions, right, by running tests themselves, collecting quantitative and qualitative data, and then assessing the test data by representing it in different ways, in tables and graphs, comparing and contrasting. and then sharing the merits of their solution, right? So comparing the solutions based on how well they met the criteria and constraints, and citing evidence for what they knew worked and didn't, what they could see, and critiquing peer solutions. So this is a great sort of summary of the expectations for the students within your grade ranges. Within virtual settings, you can really do a lot with these design challenges, and they're very flexible, as we mentioned before. Some suggestions we have here are giving students 4 to 5 days to actually do a design challenge. So introducing it on a Monday or Tuesday, and then having them share out what they built at the end of the week. Or your parents will love you for having it be introduced on Thursday or Friday, having the students work on it over the weekend and share it out on a Monday or Tuesday. That they can start with a standalone design challenge and then incorporate content. So a lot of people were commenting this was good for team building, for getting people excited about the school year. So you can use a design challenge sort of in that way and then move on to other things. Then there's different things to think about as far as introducing the challenge, prototyping and testing, and sharing solutions, that you can really do any of these pieces synchronously or asynchronously. Really though, you want to spark with 3rd through 5th graders, build off that enthusiasm and energy they have, incorporating real world problems and some whimsy and humor. That you can do things with prototyping and testing as far as having them do that synchronously or asynchronously. Having them journal and reflect on their own as they're building and testing is great, and then sharing out that out later using things like Padlet and Flipgrid, Seesaw for them to record with video what they're doing. And then again, we like synchronous sharing. It's a good team building piece of having them come back in and share and see everyone else's designs. Then you can actually send them out to prototype again and iterate on their solutions.
Yeah, somebody mentioned to us in the chat that they had tried this. They did some of the initial start of a challenge as a whole group live, and then students were sent off to experiment with it on their own, and they really enjoyed it. So that's something to keep in mind too. So we have just a final reminder, as educators, you are always learning and iterating and testing yourselves. So as you try any of these strategies, be flexible, vary them, try different things and reflect on what you're doing, and think about what you want to try next, and really target what you want to prototype as you test out design challenges in person or virtually with your 3rd through 5th graders.
So we have time for a Q&A, but as we address that, we're also going to show you a link to an exit survey, and we'll share that link in chat as well. And this link is great for us to get feedback from all of you about what you thought about the session, but please feel free to chat in some things as well. We'll give you a second to do that. I'm going to copy that into the chat. So if you give me a second, Amy. Actually, I don't need. You can show something else if you'd like to.
Okay. I was just going to remind you all that we also have a lot of resources online. So we have, and I apologize for having covered up our website links in this slide, but at thetech.org we have /resources, we have educator resources. At thetech.org/@home we have guides that can be used by parents at home, and they work well for virtual settings of sending them home with students, sort of a simplified challenge as well as some videos. And then we have a lot of those resources in Spanish as well at thetech.org/encasa.
And I'll copy those links into the chat as well. So our survey link is in there. We're getting a lot of questions about when and how will we be getting all of the resources. We'll be sending a follow-up email that has that.
Are there any
check those
other
out.
questions folks have? You can put them in the Q&A or in the chat for us as well.
So
if you have other questions.
There's specific things about implementing with your grade levels that you'd like us to touch on a little bit more. Sorry, I had chatted. I just did the Bitly survey. I chatted it to one participant rather than everyone. So.
So somebody was asking for ideas on connecting to the 5th grade standards.
So with the 5th grade standards, sorry, I'm typing and talking at the same time. I wanted to give you all the link to our resources in Spanish, and then our resources for educators.
So on our educator resources page, there are some lesson plans that are standards aligned, so you can see specific ones that might align with specific standards. Off the top of my head, I can't remember which ones are 5th grade aligned, but I feel like this one is on there and maybe for 3rd through 5th grade. So if you look up this, we have a classroom lesson plan for it as well.
Yeah, I think that there's some good ones about with 5th grade around developing and using models and planning and carrying out investigations, which I know are those practices rather than a DCI. Again, with the cause and effect, there's a lot of those things that you can explore with engineering. So having them actually collect data and then look at the cause and effect relationships. There's a lot around matter. And so I think that designing equipment that can actually help you answer those questions is sort of an interesting thing. That kind of design challenge for 5th grade of, well, how can you build something? Yeah, you can tell me that that water goes through these phases, but how can you actually design a device that can show us that, right? And you could give them some simple materials with plastic materials and Ziploc bags and acrylic boxes, so they could do something like that that really puts it on them to design something where you can actually they have to prove it to you and show you that that science experiment works, rather than just telling you they can see water going through all those phases. And then there's some things also around natural phenomenon for 5th grade. Anyone else with other grade levels and pieces?
And somebody was asking about virtual field trips. We have one that you can do asynchronously that's linked on our website. And we're also considering, since we know that schools may not be visiting our interactive this coming school year, at least in the fall, ways to do virtual field trips that are live. So if you're interested in that, please contact us and let us know. We'd love to find ways to be involved with you and your students next fall as well.
Someone had a question about resources, ideas on different design challenges. That's what's on our website. But other folks that might have it, or ways to do research and look for other resources. We've got, within a lot of our lessons, individual lessons, there are references for websites that will give you great videos and other content that will sort of demonstrate phenomenon or go along with that design challenge to allow your students and you to go a little bit deeper. So those are incorporated into a lot of the lessons that we have. And in our educator newsletter, we often share out resources from friends around the Bay Area and around the country who are doing different and exciting programs. So it looks like our time is up. We'll stay on for another 30 seconds or minute or so in case anyone has any last questions. Thank you all for attending. We really appreciate your time. And again, we will follow up with an email with a number of the PowerPoint, other resources that we shared, the websites that we shared out with you all, as well as that engineering sequence and progression.
And please feel free to give us feedback at the survey link as well.
Have a great summer, everyone. We know that this was an exceptionally interesting and challenging year for everybody. So thank you all for all the work you did.
And if anybody knows 6th through 8th grade educators who might be interested in similar ideas, we're doing another session for that age group next week on the same challenge. So feel free to check that out and share with others.